8,000 years before the Common Era, a farmer walks toward a temple storehouse. The place will one day be called Jericho. He carries barley, more than his family can eat before it rots. The temple will store it. In return, it will give him something back, not a receipt. Writing does not exist yet. It will not exist for another 4,000 years. What the temple worker hands him instead is a small clay token, a simple cone, pressed and dried in the sun. That cone means grain, a sphere means oil, and a cylinder means livestock. These tokens are the world's first accounting system. They are also the world's first money, not money you could spend at a market, but money in its rawest form. Each token is an object that says one thing: this much grain belongs to this person, and everyone in the town agrees. This system was not primitive. It was a working tool of pure abstraction. It ran for thousands of years before anyone pressed a reed into wet clay and called it writing. Every shape carried meaning: a cone for grain, a sphere for oil, a cylinder for livestock. Then the temple workers did something even bolder. They invented the bulla, a hollow clay ball. Tokens went inside it, and the ball was sealed shut. The outside carried seal marks naming both sides of the deal. This was the first tamper-proof contract in human history. If a dispute broke out, witnesses would break the bulla open and count what was inside. Nobody could change the record without smashing the seal first. That hollow clay ball is the ancestor of every written contract you have ever signed. Every mortgage, every lease, every terms of service you clicked without reading traces back to it. A ball of dried mud carried the blueprint for modern law. Around 3,300 years before the Common Era, an accountant in the city of Uruk made a leap. He realized the tokens did not need to be objects at all. Pressing a cone into wet clay left a mark. That mark still meant grain. The physical token was no longer needed. The symbol had replaced the object. That single idea is the birth of writing. Every letter you have ever read traces back to a bookkeeper who saw that a mark could stand in for a thing. The first written documents in human history were not poems. They were not prayers either. They were receipts. Money and writing were born from the same clay. They were shaped by the same need to make a promise stick. While Mesopotamian workers pressed shapes into tablets, something else was forming far away. Along the coasts of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, a small sea snail called Cypraea moneta made glossy, tough shells. They were almost impossible to fake. Around 1,200 years before the Common Era, during the Shang Dynasty in China, those shells became money, not decoration, not jewelry that changed hands now and then. Standardized, trusted currency. It moved across Asia, Africa, Oceania, and parts of Europe for more than 3,000 years. When European traders reached the west coast of Africa in the 16th century, they found entire economies built on these shells. A single human being sold into slavery might cost tens of thousands of them. A horse cost thousands more. Whole fortunes were counted in sacks of small white shells, carried across the Indian Ocean from the Maldives. The cowrie was not picked by chance. The shell is small and light, so it travels well. It resists cracking and rot for decades. Its ridged surface made it hard to copy before machines existed. But there is a deeper reason cowries beat almost every other object tried as money. The shape of a cowrie is smooth, round, and sized to sit in your palm. It echoes something small and helpless. Your brain is wired to protect things shaped like that. Scientists call this the baby schema response, an automatic urge to care triggered by round shapes and small size. The same wiring that makes you want to pick up a kitten made ancient traders reach for these shells and hold on tight. Your ancestors did not calmly decide cowries were valuable. Their nervous systems decided for them. Gold followed a similar path, through a different door. An Egyptian medical text called the Kuru Papyrus was written around 1,550 years before the Common Era. It describes gold used in surgery. Gold does not rust. It does not tarnish. Metal placed inside the body stays unchanged for a lifetime. That permanence made gold feel sacred, and sacred things tend to become money. Metal took a further step forward in China. Around 640 years before the Common Era, workers at a site called Guanzhuang cast spade-shaped bronze coins. They used standardized molds. Archaeologists from the State University of Zhengzhou confirmed and dated this site in the year 2021. It is now the oldest known coin mint on record. 7,000 kilometers to the west, the Kingdom of Lydia had a different problem. Lydian rivers carried electrum, a natural mix of gold and silver. For centuries, it moved as raw nuggets. Every trade meant weighing and testing the metal by hand. Then King Alyattes changed the rules. Sometime around 600 to 650 years before the Common Era, he ordered the metal formed into standard lumps. Each lump was stamped with a lion's head. The stamp was a guarantee. It told every merchant the weight was certified. It told them the purity was true. Nobody had to test the metal again. This was the birth of real coinage in the West. A piece of metal now carried a king's word, stamped right onto its face. The idea spread fast. Within decades, Greek cities were striking their own coins. Athens made silver coins showing the owl of the goddess Athena. Corinth struck coins showing the winged horse Pegasus. Traders across the Mediterranean knew both images on sight. The Persian Empire adopted coinage under Cyrus the Great. It produced the gold daric and the silver siglos, coins that ruled trade across the Near East for 2 centuries. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia, he built one coinage system stretching from Greece to India. He replaced the symbols of conquered kings with his own face. By then, the face on a coin was worth more than the metal beneath it. China went further still. During the Song Dynasty, the government began printing paper notes called jiaozi. This created a strange problem. How do you convince a stranger that a sheet of mulberry bark is worth the same as a stack of metal? The answer was to back every note with iron coin held in state treasuries. The paper itself carried no value of its own. It was a claim on real metal sitting in a vault. Anyone who doubted the paper could walk in and trade it for coin. The Venetian merchant Marco Polo wrote about this system after visiting China in the late 13th century. He described how officials turned mulberry bark into sheets and stamped them with royal authority. He explained that merchants took the paper because they could trade it for gold or silver anytime. When Polo brought this story home, most of Europe refused to believe him. Some readers even called him a liar. Polo had seen something Europe would not grasp for another 400 years. He had watched money finish its journey from a physical object into pure agreement. A clay token stood for grain. A cowrie stood for portable trust. A Lydian coin stood for royal authority. A piece of Chinese paper stood for nothing except a shared decision that it mattered. The thinker David Graeber argued that money never grew out of simple trading between strangers. It grew out of debt. It grew out of the duty to repay what had been given. It grew out of the need to track who owed what to whom, across time and distance. The earliest money was not something you could hold in your hand. It was a bond you could not walk away from. That explains why the Mesopotamian token system worked for 4,000 years before anyone invented writing. The clay itself was worthless. What mattered was that everyone in the town agreed on what each shape meant. That agreement was enforced by the oldest force in any society, the simple fact that a broken promise gets remembered. None of this ever lived in the objects themselves. The part of your brain that tracks reward, the part that senses trust, and the part that senses danger all evolved to manage food, threats, and relationships long before markets existed. Money simply borrowed that wiring. It never gave it back. The paper folded in your wallet is not valuable in any physical sense. Neither are the numbers glowing on your banking app. They hold value because you believe they do and because everyone around you believes it too. 10,000 years of practice trained your brain to see meaning in a symbol. It trained you to trust a promise. It started with a cone of dried clay, handed to a farmer outside a storehouse in Jericho. You are still running on that same trained instinct. Every time you tap a card against a reader,